And we are live with our old friend George from G3, analyst and military contractor. And what we have today is some pretty amazing information for those of us that are having a dearth of information, in the sense that over information on both sides of the equation of what we're going to be talking about today. And that is how the West has been checkmated by President Putin of Russia. Now, I should say, as a forward, neither George nor myself are taking money. The first thing that people are going to be asking, oh, where's your money coming from? Is it from US aid, or is it in rubles from Putin? No, we're not Lauren Chen, we're not Dave Rubin, we're not Tim Pool, we're not Lauren Southern getting money from Moscow. And also on the other side, we're not getting money from US aid. We are absolutely independent. We are giving you this information that George will be releasing to the general public. When is it, George? Tomorrow?
Oh yeah, I've been reorganizing my my papers on Energy Newsbeat. But yeah, I'm another one tomorrow, another set.
All right, so this information will be released tomorrow for the general public, but it's going to be getting its birth here on this show. It's going to be an in-depth analysis of the kinds of questions that people are having. How did this happen? Where are we right now? We've been told for 3 years that the war is going this way, where obviously it's gone sideways. Why has the Trump administration completely flipped the narrative that we've been hearing for 3 years of we will stay as long as it takes, we will invest and pay as long as it takes, we will defeat the evil Putler? Again, we should say we have nothing invested, either of us, on either side of this conflict, as I would suggest most Americans, North Americans, most Western Europeans, in fact, as well as Australians, New Zealanders. We have nothing invested in this fight. We've got no dog in the fight. We're just sitting here as two people analyzing the situation as best we can. Especially, most of the analysis will come from George, and I'm going to defer to his expertise. But before we do that, I'd like to say that we are, time permitting, you can get your questions into George. All of them will be read. George will answer them. But there's also the prospect, time permitting, that we will allow call-ins to the show. Call-ins will be, I will, if time permitting, I'll put the link to join the show in the comment sections of the feed, the chat feeds, time permitting. But the only thing I would ask is you give a succinct question, not engage in conversation, because I've learned, I think, from listening to Rush Limbaugh when I was younger, succinct, fast, clear questions are the best way to communicate in a format like this. So with all of that out of the way, before we begin, George, for those of our audience that haven't encountered you on this show, which you've been on many times, would you perhaps like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like we stated before. I've been a private military contractor for the better part of the last 15 years, in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Middle East. But as far as receiving, money from anybody, no, I have to report all foreign contacts to the government, and they have access to all my bank accounts, credit cards, and everything else. Mm-hmm. So you know the deal. Same deal as your brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should also say that George and I have been doing this for quite a while. George has spent, as he said, a long time in the Middle East and as an analyst in these areas. So we're not talking from George is not talking out of his ass when he talks about these. And I should tell you before we begin, these are complex subjects, so you're going to have to pay attention to them, because sometimes some of the feedback is that it's really quite dense information. So I would say that please try and follow along with us. And I will be monitoring the chat. If you guys do have questions, you can provide them in the chats that we're on X, we're on BitChute. No, we're not on BitChute. We're on DLive. We're on Rumble, and we're on well, YouTube, of course. Super chats. You can also send super chats, which we very much appreciated. As we said, we are not, George and I are not being paid by NFO. We're not being paid by we're not being paid by anybody. So it would be appreciated, any super chats. And again, should we find ourselves able, via time permitting, we will be taking call-ins. So with that said, George, I'm going to bring up our first.
Yeah, go to if you put the slide set up.
Yeah.
Go, regarding your other question about, sometimes my stuff is too dense, or
I don't think it's too dense. I think you're just trying to provide us a lot of information in the shortest amount of time possible. So sometimes it does require people to listen carefully.
Yeah. It's but go down a couple of slides. I don't have that slide set up here.
Which slides?
Go down to the 4 levels of warfare of strategy bridge.
4 levels of warfare.
It's the one that looks like a stoplight. There you go.
This one. Okay, here we are. And I'm going to try to bring this up as large as possible for the audience. Oh, can we get in chat? Now, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to remove the chat, the overlay on the chat, so we can see this a little better. There, how's that? That's better. All right.
Oh, okay. So what I'm actually doing is the very top of the grand strategic levels of analysis, because I'm using the integrated, psychological, political, economic, demographic, geopolitical framework from my unified behavioral theory slide sets over into the geopolitical realm. Okay, the reason why that's important is geopolitics consists of 3 areas: economic development theory, geostrategic theory, and then targeting packages. Economic development theory is about taking raw materials out of the ground, either minerals or agriculture, turn it into a consumer product, and then distributing those products. And then you have liquidity, a financial system that liquefies that makes it possible. So in economic theory, you're looking at where men and materials are on the ground, how to most efficiently get it to a factory, produce it, and then distribute it. Okay, if you know what that is, it's very constructive and pragmatic. Geostrategic theory is the exact opposite. It's how to sabotage a rival's economic development strategies. So if I'm talking on Energy Newsbeat, I'm talking to a bunch of people that have MBAs, it's faster to explain to them, A, I'm at the grand strategic level is what we're talking about. B, I can talk about solo swan models or modeling the core economy with general equilibrium theory. When you're throwing an economy on balance or off balance, and then what bottlenecks are in the global supply chains, and how to either block that, in geostrategic terms, you're trying to block that with maritime choke point strategies, or riverine choke point strategies, or terrestrial land bridge choke point strategies, or in the case of using the petrodollar and the U.S. Currency as a world reserve currency, the BRICS nations now have to develop their own currency, because the West has just been so sanctions happy, they're driving people towards it. So what most channels do, actually, let me go back and explain this other thing. The levels of warfare and the institutional levels this is not just referring to the military side. You have the same levels on the intelligence community side, the same levels on the executive executive agency, law enforcement agencies, and the civilian bureaucracies as well, like the Department of Interior, Department of Commerce, and Department of Energy, those kind of agencies. The grand strategic level of warfare in our system, because we have a dual egoistic ideology. You vote in your self-interest in democracy, or representative democracy that we have, or, you know, a republic, or you spend your money and invest in your own self-interest in democracy. So that's why it's a dual egoistic system. The grand strategic level actually exists in big finance, big oil. Mainly in big finance and big oil, because they have the highest number of analysts. They have way more analysts than the government's going to have analysts. If you think about the number of people that have PhDs in economics or MBAs or accountants, then the number in the global business hierarchy, from, you know, super big business multinationals all the way down to the major companies, all the way down to the smaller ones, yeah, it dwarfs what the intelligence community has. So in our system, what General Wesley Clark was talking about with the foreign policy coup and his 7 countries in 5 years speeches back in 2007.
Can you remind us what those countries were, George? It was Iraq, Sudan, Syria, Iran. Help me out. Which was the other one?
It's easier to go in order because, you know, it's Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. And then you have Libya, Sudan, and Somalia. It's easier that's actually 8, because when he was saying that, we're already in Afghanistan.
Right.
Well, when he was originally saying that. Okay. So that would have been prior to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So that, so the point there is, if you GWAT and what GWAT is Global War on Terror. Yeah, I know this is going to really surprise people, but it's just a big land grab to take over the petroleum fields. But most importantly, you're trying to control the land bridges going back to Europe, because you have to control the pipeline routes. Having the petroleum fields without the delivery routes is useless, because then you can't turn the product into wealth through trade and then reinvest it. Reinvest it is actually how the West is actually trying to send all of the profits to City of London and Wall Street, but it's mostly the City of London that's been doing it the longest. So you take over, by taking over the Middle East. If you go down to one of the maps, or you bring up Google Maps so people can get a visual on it. Right. The purpose of taking over Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and there's maps all the way down in that slide set.
Which do you prefer, Google Maps or one in here?
Whatever you bring up the fastest is easiest.
I've already got the Middle East set up here. I'll bring that up right now.
So what they're trying to take over is, again, it's the West already controlled the maritime choke points during the Cold War. So after the Cold War ends, then there's the race to take over the riverine choke points and the terrestrial land bridge choke points. So terrestrial land bridge choke points are typically between the mountain range and a river, or the mountain range and the ocean. All right, so so that's fine. Later in the slide set, not for you to change it, but I have all the pipeline maps overlaid with the land bridge routes. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of the global war on terror is basically, you want it. Well, let me back up a second. The purpose of moving NATO and eastwards is to take over the European peninsula. So yeah, move it down a little bit, and let's take a look at what the European peninsula looks like for people that aren't used to this type of geostrategic theorizing. All right, yeah, go down a little bit. All right, so you're talking about yeah, go down a little bit. Oh, I need I need St. Petersburg in the map.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So you're talking about the area from St. Petersburg and the Gulf of Finland all the way down to Rostov-on-Don in the Azov Sea. They moved the EU eastward because you're not controlling the European peninsula with a military. It's not a hot war. It's an economic trade war. It's a mercantilistic war. So then you're putting tariff barriers on Russian goods going east to west, and you're putting up non-tariff trade barriers. Okay, the biggest thing here is you can ship oil economically by ship, ocean-going ship.
Well, all trade is more economical via oceans, is it not? Other than perhaps pipelines.
Except for two things: natural gas by pipelines and electricity by grid. Okay, and then this is where politicians having no idea about how the grand strategic level works, because what I found out in the past 3 years is what the big finance companies must be doing is sending their people to the Yale Grand Strategy seminars every summer. Yeah, me and a couple other guys finally figured that out. And then they only send their select few economists to those seminars. So the rest of their people in their organizations are just as clueless as Keith Kellogg.
Right. And we were going to talk about Keith Kellogg and how his plan was DOA, dead on arrival.
Oh, yeah.
As we go on.
Yeah, that's what we're explaining here, because you look at as soon as, well, boy, we did the video with Michael De La Brock, and when was that? Mid-November. It was after the elections.
Probably mid-November, early December.
No, it was right after the elections. I was still in
November.
In Northern Virginia. So yeah, it was that. It must have been like in that week right after the elections. So yeah, they were all like, it was a big win in Syria, and I didn't really think so, but we'd already gone for 2 hours, so I wasn't really going to debate it, because with the big story there is, and you saw it on Telegram in the days after we did our live stream, is the Russians were basically calmly packing up their goods, their
bases,
from their interior bases, and then going through the HTS choke points in Latakia and Tartus. Well, the only way that can happen is if it's prearranged, because HTS didn't overrun their bases. The Russians just turned over their interior bases to the Turkish military and just left. See, that's all prearranged. That means the whole Syria thing was prearranged, and then it begs the question of why would it be prearranged? Well, for one thing, Putin wanted to get rid of, the 60 or 70 billion dollars a year that he was spending on supporting Assad. It would have been so much cheaper for him to abandon that 10 years ago and just give $1 billion to Assad to leave in the first place. He would have saved a lot of money. It's not geostrategically important. See, once you stop doing commerce in a country, there is no reason to have your military there. All the military is the armed guards for a nation state. If they're not doing commerce to protect their shipping routes or their railways or highways or pipelines, there's no reason for them to be there. So, and there hasn't been a reason for years, because the United States control the oil fields in northeastern Syria.
So why don't you tell us how this and the control of these oil fields and pipelines, how this relates to what's happening right now in not only Ukraine, but also how the administration of Donald Trump has done a complete 180 from that of Joe Biden. Now, obviously, there are issues with Joe Biden. People will talk about him being no less than a puppet of the deep state and of these organizations. But how does this relate politically to what we're seeing right now?
Well, it's a good thing you asked that question, because then the last Russian natural gas pipeline contracts are ending December 31st. So that makes all the natural gas from the Middle East and Russia all going through Turkey. Yeah, okay, there you go. So now that means Erdogan can charge whatever prices he wants for Russian natural gas by pipeline, or Turkish or Azeri natural gas by pipeline, or the natural gas coming by any other pipeline. That means he basically controls the fate of the European Union and therefore NATO. I'm sorry, I just got to laugh because I've been talking about pipelines and petrodollars since our videos on with Michael de LeBrock in March of 2022 when the war started.
Yeah.
Because I've been tracking pipelines and logistical, sea power versus land power logistical supply routes. Boy, the biggest way to convert production into wealth is natural gas by pipeline, because it's so much cheaper than any other form of energy. And here's where you get into, they didn't increase, boy, you get into so many contradictions. It's like, where do you even start? The United States has wanted to cut off Russian natural gas ever since the 1960s. I go over that in the Energy Newsbeat videos I do with them. I talk about that numerous occasions on the Working Brother channel since, what was that, the end of December 2022, when I started doing videos with him. Mm-hmm. So the whole point of moving NATO east is, you're controlling, in one sense, you're controlling the European peninsula. But what you're really trying to strangle, and it says this, and there's like DW videos on Russian Gazprom. I think it's the Corrupt Energy Empire or something like that is the title. But the guy says right at the beginning, he says, we want to stop Russia from selling us gas and using the proceeds to rebuild its military. All right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In more complicated, speech, what he's saying is they want to totally strangle the Russian economy. In terms of economic development theory, in terms of economic development theory, they don't want to have a petroleum-based export-led growth strategy to fund an import substitution industrialization investment strategy. They don't want it to fund the economic modernization strategy of Russia, and they did that ever since the 90s. They took Richard Audie's research curse book about his book in 94. It's about the mineral development of North Africa and their system of governance. Is the West just started paying these dictators just to have their militaries protect their mining or oil operations. And what the political and economic development theorists were saying, next to forever, is they're stuck in these primitive forms of government and primitive economies. So they were arguing about how to stop it. Well, just like Orwell's 1984, they used it as an owner's manual. They used that how to perfect it. And that comes from, there's a certain number of books I leave handy because they're props. Charles Wilbur and Kenneth Jameson. Well, Charles Wilbur was a professor at Notre Dame, and Kenneth Wilberson took took over for him. But he had been doing these books titled "The Political Economy of Development and Underdevelopment." I want to say since the 70s. I pretty much have most of the editions because it's a really good anthology that has the leading papers published in economic development theory and what the trends are. Each opening section, and you can get these things for $10 used off of Amazon. What's really good about him is, he has the introduction to the first edition, second edition, third edition, fourth edition, fifth and sixth edition. So if you get the later editions and you read through the introductions of those things, you get a great synopsis of what the history of economic development theory is since the 1950s. Okay, why am I saying this? The dependency schools of Andre Gunder Frank, the more left-leaning economists, and the structuralists like Raoul Prebisch and Hans Singer, what they've been saying in the 1950s and 60s is that, I know this is going to shock people, but the way that the colonial system was working was to send all the money to the European banking system. It was Amsterdam and the Netherlands entrepôts at first, including Belgium. And then later it became, after the British pretty much became dominant sea power over all the other minor powers, then the banking system moved to the city of London. Then after the United States started and the New World and JP Morgan and all those people, the banking centers moved to Wall Street.
All right, we have a question here, and and this is something I think we'll get into as we go. But I want to say thanks to Savage Savant. It's appreciated it's a good question. He says Zelensky said about half of the money that the USA sent to the Ukraine is missing. Are those in his inner circle turning on him? Did he throw them under the bus by mentioning the missing money? Why else would he mention it? Now, that's a good question because I've seen this being brought up by many different people in the sense that why would Zelensky, when he's asked, he's got his hand out, I want more aid, give me more aid, all I need. I actually had a video I put out yesterday, and it talked about how Zelensky was saying, we only needed a few more years and a few $100 billion more, and we could have defeated Russia, but now we can't. And in fact, we haven't actually received less than half of the assistance allocated. He's saying that the money is gone. There's been numerous reports of not Zelensky personally, but a lot of his officials and people within his regime being prosecuted within Ukraine itself for laundering and embezzlement. Especially I read somewhere that, and chat might be able to help jog my memory, it was either 40 million or 50 million or somewhere in that ballpark of money that was allocated for the purchase of mortar rounds that went into one of his gang's pocket. Now, why would he be saying this? Why would Zelensky be publicly saying that, telling the American people that half of their taxpayer money that was sent to this country is not there? It's disappeared. It's gone. It's vanished into the ether. Why would he mention something like that, do you believe, George?
Oh, the answer is very easy. Treasury Secretary Bissett went there to do an audit. So
why would he be honest about this is the question.
Because he's going to get caught anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, they want to know where most of it went. The other thing is they already know they already know what the answer is. I mean, all the property purchases in Europe and North America are pretty easy to track. Who's been buying $1 million
chalets on the French Riviera, I believe is what I remember reading. Chalets on the Riviera, and also just blocks of properties, right? Not just personal mansions on the French Riviera, but just blocks of properties. like buying up entire roads as well. So
yeah, so it's the truth's going to come out. The money's already spent. The money's traceable. So he just went ahead and came out with it. He's also trying to say that most of the money went to the Western military industrial complex.
That's another thing, yeah, which I don't disagree with somewhat. I mean, part of his excuse as well, and I actually would probably believe him, is that this was actually, the Ukraine war was a boon for the U.S. and European military industrial complexes, because they were able to offload their older equipment whilst buying new equipment. And I remember reading when Trump was talking about reducing the amount of aid to Ukraine, all of the defense company stocks, they just plummeted. But also in the sense that he's kind of strange in the fact is that he was talking about a year ago how the West was benefiting from the Ukraine in terms of being able to understand how kinetic warfare in the modern age actually works, because for the past 50 years, in wars like Vietnam, in the first Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, and a bunch of the different policing actions you'll see, in Somalia and elsewhere, are pretty much modern militaries with night vision goggles, attack helicopters, missiles, Patriot batteries. They're fighting men in sandals with Kalashnikovs. And this is basically the first real kinetic war that has been seen on a large scale in decades. And how this was a benefit for America and Europe and their arms manufacturers. So all that we need is the military hardware, and we will provide all the information that you in the military industrial complex will need. There's been a lot of very weird kind of comments, they're very honest comments, but the level of honesty I found very odd, indeed, that he's saying these things. Now, going from there, let's hop on. Let's go from there. Let's move on to now. How has President Putin in this particular case? How has he been able to checkmate the Western states? We've talked about how Turkey is now going to be able to be dictating and controlling the EU via energy. How else has Putin sat back and allowed the West to basically commit geopolitical suicide?
Yeah, well, I was getting to that. The whole purpose of moving NATO eastward is to stop Russian trade east to west, but it really focuses on Russian natural gas for a couple of different reasons. One, it's the cheapest and cleanest form of energy. Two, the oil extraction was done by a lot of Western joint ventures. So a lot of the profits were never reinvested in Russia. They were going to London and Wall Street. That's one of the things Jeffrey Sachs has been complaining about, because, that's why I was talking about the Richard Audi resource curse phenomenon, because after the fall of the Soviet Union, when they were doing the Shadowland 500-day plan and converting it from from the non-market back to a market economy, they gave a lot of these resources and manufacturing facilities to the oligarchs, because it's so much easier to manage a couple of dozen people than if they broke it up into perfect competition and then manage 100, hundreds or even thousands of much smaller businesses. So they made it easier to administer, but in doing so, they created the oligarchs. And what the Russian nationalist oligarchs didn't like was so many of them were Western-backed oligarchs, just like you have Western globalist politicians. So they rigged the political realm as much as possible in Eastern Europe, and they tried to rig the economic realm as well. So the people that were overly, because I was watching I'm just going to say it, just a dumbass British show, wondering why it was allowed for all that money to be flowing through London banks. They called it Londongrad.
Londongrad. Okay.
Yeah, during the 90s and the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it just a complete. There's so many British TV shows. It was, I don't know, it wasn't BBC, but it was something like that. And the reason why it's so stupid is because, and the reason why I'm bringing up the structuralist and dependency schools of thought is because it was doing exactly what it was designed to do, to siphon the money out of Russia so they couldn't develop over to Western bank accounts. So, those British broadcasters didn't realize that the Western companies were just looting the place.
Mm.
Exactly what Jeffrey Sachs and a whole bunch of other people have been talking about. But, the reason why I keep on holding up these books is because the West, especially the liberals, when I went to university, they were supposed to stop that. Oh no. Oh no. Now that the neoliberals and the left is in charge, oh no. They're using it as an owner's manual, just like Orwell's
1984 is they're using for speech and censorship in Western countries. What was your take on JD Vance's basically what I mean? They're calling it a blistering speech that caught the European elite completely off guard at the Munich conference last week, where they expected him to talk about transatlantic unity in the face of despotic leadership coming out of Russia, and how if the democratic principles of the West and the democracies of the West aren't unified against the evil Putler, that the armies of darkness will march across the face of the earth, where he actually talked about none of that. He said that our slide, the liberal democratic slides in Europe are making it such that the values that the United States holds versus the values that Europe holds are now incompatible. And and a lot of this sort of my analysis of that was as well is, why should the United States support countries that no longer hold these values, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and the ability to have clear democratic elections. They're talking about how, for example, in Germany, or not just Germany, but other countries that are having populist movements that the United States had with President Donald Trump, how these elections, we could just cancel them, or we can basically put up a firewall to any sort of political party, even though that they might, in a parliamentary democracy, come out in first place in the election, how we'll firewall them from any kind of legitimate governing over the country. And he brought these topics up. And you're looking at all of the European news rags, and I call them rags on purpose, talking about how JD Vance and America have killed the transatlantic relationship and how the alliance between America and Europe is dead. Now, I'm not sure if the word alliance is actually a very good description of how the interaction between the United States and Europe goes. But what are your thoughts on how JD Vance and the Trump administration have flipped the script on Europe over the last couple of weeks in relation to not only the subjects I just brought up, but how things are coming along with the Ukraine situation?
Well, we're not quite there yet, but I'll give you the quick answer. The quick answer is Trump won the election and was talking about how basically Ukraine is winning the war and the Russian economy is about to collapse. None of that is true. What that means is Keith Kellogg and that whole crew had completely misinformed President Trump. And in that first inauguration week, President Trump had no idea why Putin was calling him.
Oh, yeah, this is something I wanted to get into. Can you elaborate on that for us, for the audience? I think they'll find it very fascinating.
Yeah, well, that was when Michael Yon called me because he knew I was blogging about it. Well, he knows I talk about pipelines and petrodollars for years now, and he knows that that after, well, once the natural gas pipeline ended in ended going through Ukraine on December 31st, I had been blogging in our closed blogs, and then going on Energy Newsbeat and Working Brother, but mostly Energy Newsbeat because it's energy news, and talking about, wow, all Putin has to do now is absolutely nothing other than just sit back and watch the European economies continue to collapse. If they continue to collapse, and I've been talking about this for a long time, then the populist parties take over Germany and the entire Danube River Valley, and then they leave the EU, they leave NATO, they rebuild Nord Stream, they leave the petrodollar, buy oil and gas in rubles, and then the Wolfowitz plan and the Rand strategies of 2019 have completely backfired and have created exactly the situation that they were trying to avoid. That's why I was explaining how the whole GWAT era was about how to take over these choke points and encircle and stop Russian trade. Okay, so they've succeeded. They stopped all Russian natural gas from going to Europe. Russian natural gas is the cheapest form of energy. Those people that have that natural gas advantage, their industries will do very well on the global markets. If your energy costs increase, you get Siemens, BASF, the Volkswagen Group, and
BMW, Mercedes. Yeah,
and the different, well, and the other European automakers too. Seat, Peugeot, Renault. None of them are going to make it now.
Mm-hmm.
So they just cut themselves off from their lifeline. And GWAT was about cutting off Russian natural gas, and then B, taking over the oil fields in the Middle East or North Africa and delivering it via pipeline to Europe. So they did the A, and then they didn't do the B.
So George, how with as you're discussing right now, how you're seeing, we're honestly seeing the economic suicide of an entire continent with no tangible benefits. How do you see the calls from recently people such as French President Emmanuel Macron? He's talking about raising a grand army of Europe. When he's talking about investing 250 billion or more, I believe, euros per year into that venture. I've seen Keir Starmer, who's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's probably one of the most unpopular prime ministers I've ever seen in my life. I mean, that's a qualified statement because these prime ministers become quite unpopular as their tenure progresses. I mean, from the get-go, this guy's been very unpopular. He's talking about putting boots on the ground in the Ukraine, where the Navy that once ruled the seas, the British Navy, can't even float an aircraft carrier without having problems. How are Europeans with a declining economy? And I should also note that for the audience, that the economy of Europe has basically not grown in the last 17, 18 years. It's been stagnant, and all of their focus has been on basically the importation of people from Africa and the Middle East and the expansion of the welfare state to the detriment of all other aspects of the needed parts of government spending, especially military, with the United States signaling that it's no longer going to give Europe a free ride, Europe being marred in economic quicksand. And now they're talking about raising an army to become a power in their own right, because obviously they aren't. How realistic is this for Europe to be squawking on the rooftops about their rise to global power?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer there is the leftists are absolutely delusional. They've destroyed the university system. by abandoning the scientific project, that's in my 7P plan papers that are going to be posted on Energy Newsbeat also and Raven Geostrategic. I got to throw that plug in there, because this is such a high level of stupidity. Because the Green
I don't mean to interrupt, George. I'm gonna, for those of you watching after the broadcast, those of you watching on the rewatch, or if you want to come back after we finish, I'll post those links in the description so people can find George's work on those sites. Sorry, George, you keep going.
Yeah, those papers are dense, but people were, well, without them, without the grand strategic level, yeah, Trump got into his first week of office and had no idea why Putin didn't want to talk to him. Just no clue. And it should be so painfully obvious, because you had the Green Party in Germany stopping coal and fossil fuels and shutting down the nuclear plants. At the same time, the neoconservatives are trying to encircle Russia to strangle its economy, in the hope that that Russia itself is going to collapse into a whole bunch of different oblasts and republics. But none of that happened. So this whole, Brzezinski, Wolfowitz, Rand doctrine and strategy just absolutely didn't materialize. And they were planning this. That's what the neoconservatives were planning. People go look at the Paul Wolfowitz plan, George Herbert Walker Bush 41, thought it was so stupid. He declassified it and gave it to the New York Times and Washington Post to publish it, hoping that nobody would ever pursue this again. All right. I have to pause there and let people sink in. People can download that. So what does George W. Bush 43 do? What does Cheney do? With Rumsfeld. That's exactly the policy that they put into play. I mean, some of this, so they're planning for this war with Russia and doing everything that they can to strangle the Russian economy. And the Europeans, and then, again, Trump in 2017 told them to go start investing more in their militaries, and they still don't. Now, all of a sudden, the United States is $36 trillion and broke. Okay, let me back up a second. When Bill Clinton left office, we were less, and I'm no fan of Bill Clinton, we were less than $6 trillion in debt. And the last several years of his office, the combination between Clinton and Gingrich produced budget surpluses that were paying the debt down. All right. Mm-hmm. So the accumulated national budget deficits was actually going in the right direction. It was going down. Well, when Bush left office, it went from, I think it was about 5.7, 5.8 trillion to about 10 trillion. So it basically more or less doubled. When Obama left office, it doubled again to about 20 trillion. And then with the combination of Trump and then Biden, with the COVID stuff thrown in there, now we're at 36 trillion. Okay, let's go back. I said that we were going to hit low levels of inflation at 30 trillion, higher levels of inflation in the mid 30s at 35 trillion, and then hyperinflation at 40 trillion.
Yeah, you've been saying this, and I should say this for the audience. You've been saying this since you and I have been doing these streams about the benchmark of 35 trillion. And and I think I think people should know that this is not something that you've just come up with in the last week or so. This is something you've been saying consistently now for years.
And 4 years before that in our Discord chats.
Exactly. So we've had this conversation for years now, and I just want to make that clear to everyone listening that George has been very, very consistent with his analyses and his forecasts, his geopolitical forecasts, not only with the pipelines, but also economic forecasts. And lo and behold, they seem to not only materialize, but be very, very accurate. Just a quick comment from our friend, Rolf Steiner. He's a good friend to the show. And he said, could the UK, this is obviously tongue in cheek, but I'd just like to get it out there. Could the UK bring in 10 million new rocket scientists and engineers from Africa and the Middle East to help Britain become the most powerful caliphate in Europe? Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, I spend quite a bit of time in London. I spent, I don't know how many months in 2024. And London is no longer a Western city. Put it that way. It is not. It is something else. And it's rapidly descending into chaos. And this is why it gets back to what George was saying about, sorry.
Rob's got another good question. Why do I come up with the 30 to 40 trillion dollar range? Oh, it's because the interest on the debt payments are now exceeding the Pentagon budgets. If you continue this way, you will be paying, at some point, you're going to be paying more in interest payments than you are for all the other government expenditures, both discretionary and non-discretionary spending. Okay, so what's the problem with that? Well, the liberal welfare state is wanting to expand the Great Society welfare programs, since LBJ was in office during the 60s. They want to make the United States a socialist country. Well, no, the parasites are just killing the host. It's, we're $36 trillion in debt on allocated spent income. But with unfunded Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare expenditures and things like that, you're about, I don't know, 250 trillion in debt. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? Well, when the COVID lockdowns, all these Cuomo and these different northeastern governors, well, they just happened to put some COVID patients back into the elderly homes, which wiped out the elderly homes. Didn't they just save themselves like an untold amount of money in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid expenses? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And this is something that we've been talking about quite often. And it's a mathematical certainty, what you've been explaining for years. So it's definitely something. So let's move. Sorry, go ahead. If you have something else to add there.
Yeah, let's get back in point because the Cloward and Piven program. Yeah. That's what the left is doing, but the United States is trying to be the superpower. So you have the neoconservatives that want to be the sole superpower in the Wolfowitz doctrine, and Rand 2019, and you have the neoliberals that want to go, or the left that want to go to a socialist state with Cloward and Piven. You have the neoliberals in between that want more of everything. And John Orsani started talking about, he did videos that all the social sciences need Pareto optimal models because these things are so contradictory. You can't have them all. Okay, he's a mathematician talking about linear programming, max mins, but the rest of social sciences didn't adopt any frameworks for success failure parameters. So it's just gone into complete nonsense. Mm-hmm. All right, let me get back. I want to get to the JD Vance angle.
Right.
I did not forget. I wrote it down on my little legal pad here to get back to it. But I need to explain this in a causal order because I need to explain how the Europeans have absolutely done, there's no planning at all. So I left off before on the left had shut off their coal factories and shut down the nuclear factories in plants in Germany. At the same time, the neocons are trying to stop the Russian natural gas flow because they don't want the Russians and the Germans to integrate, and they don't want the Russians to be able to get to pursue an export-led growth strategy and re-modernize their military. Well, now that they've cut off all Russian natural gas to Europe, Russia did not collapse as planned. Okay, what happened with the sanctions? The Western joint venture people had to leave. Mostly oil companies and a whole bunch of other businesses as well. They had to leave. So when they did that, the profits stopped going back from Russia rather, to the city of London and Wall Street and Switzerland, of course. So now it works to Putin's advantage because the money is staying in Russia. So they don't have a cost push inflation or monetary inflation. They have a demand pull inflation. Okay, at some point, all inflation is monetary, but in this case, the monetary inflation isn't from them running the printing presses. It's from the money not going back to the city of London and Wall Street. So the Western sanctions have actually solved that structuralist school and dependency school problem of the money no longer goes back to what they call the colonial core. So the sanctions have backfired in every single way imaginable. So now all Putin has to do is sit and wait for the European economies to collapse. The Populist Party, well, okay, if the European economies collapse and they can heavily influence, I hate to use the word elections. I'm a political science major, and if you ever use that word, it just gets strikes, which is, anyway, I just said it. But that ritual that we do the ritual that is associated with the democratic process. Okay. So now if the populist parties don't take over, Europe just declines, and then they're no longer a major power, let alone a superpower. So then Russia doesn't have to worry about it. Okay, but if the populist parties win, which they eventually will, then they're going to rebuild Nord Stream, go start buying Russian natural gas again to rebuild their economies, but then they have to get rid of the EU and NATO, which is fine with Putin. It's really fine with Putin and Xi either way. But now all Putin has to do is nothing and sit back and watch everything collapse. Okay, I need to make this next point. Trump gets into office by talking about he's going to deal with Putin from a position of strength. Yeah, I mean, every now and then I turn on Sebastian Gorka when he's on Newsmax and he's saying the same thing. And then, Hannity and Mark Levin on, I can't even watch Fox News anymore. It's Brian Kilmeade. It's beyond stupid.
Yeah.
They don't know the energy in geopolitics. They just repeat ISW, Institute of Study of War, talking points. Institute of Study of War is the project, is the new name for the Project for the American Century by Bill Kristol and Kimberly Kagan, who's married to Frederick Kagan, who's the brother, who's the brother of Robert Kagan, who's been writing, advocating the Wolfowitz Rand documents. And also he was a director at Brookings Institution, but then he was editor for Washington Post during the Biden administration. But yeah, and then Lena Kagan is on the Supreme Court. So there's all these Kagans that really do run Washington. So anyway, so now Trump goes into office and he doesn't know why Putin is avoid meeting with him. That was when Michael Yon had been reading my blogs in the private chats and on Energy Newsbeat, because he's been on, I got him on Energy Newsbeat before. So when some people were wondering about that in a certain closed chat group, he started pushing my work forward. So that's why we were actually supposed to do a video for Epic Times on Wednesday in late January. And after some phone calls, that video was forbidden to air. It was canceled. I came back from Panama City, and then I had taken the those, my chats from Telegram and Signal, the closed accounts, and then I started writing them into formal documents because, well, with the change in administrations, my lawfare problems decreased significantly.
Right.
Okay. We talked about that off air. But yeah, the powers that be can really lawfare you under certain conditions, and some of those conditions change because the last thing that they want someone to come on and talk about is their plans are an abysmal failure. Anyway, so now that's why all of a sudden on Thursday, Rubio went out on the Megyn Kelly show, and at the end of that, started walking back. The Trump is going to deal with a position of strength towards Putin. And then Kellogg did the same thing on the Bret Baier show. I think the Duran, McGregor, and the deep dive with Danny Davis all covered that phenomenon. Well, I've been talking about it for a month, and yeah, I mean, everybody knows I collaborate with Michael Yan. That information got forwarded up a certain chain. And then, so then in retrospect, I didn't know what was going on then, but I know now. Yeah, they didn't want Trump finding that out from Epic Times. And a bunch of YouTubers.
Yeah, you were explaining that to me before we went live. It's a really interesting story.
You have people that are heads of $1 billion enterprises, and I'm over here working with no budget. But it's crowdsource the truth, right?
Right,
it's
right.
That old saying. It's with a whole bunch of people with different expertise pushing information up the chain is actually how it works. But yeah, I've been doing this on Energy Newsbeat, and I'm going to go ahead and explain this other part because since I started posting a lot of this stuff, since I took about a 7-month hiatus from Energy Newsbeat to do some other projects, maybe 6 months, I don't know. And I came back after I was helping people behind the scenes with the Butler assessment. I think we did one of those shows, if I'm not mistaken. But I waited 3 weeks, before I was going to do it. But I did one on Energy Newsbeat and one on your show. After that, Stuart Turley could not go on. You couldn't access his website from Google inside the United States. Then from September, when I started doing the geopolitical slide sets, then his servers got attacked so badly, he was down for 2 weeks right around the election and couldn't post a big backlog of my videos. So then we catch up on those and start doing basically why Syria was prearranged, followed by, that was done over December. And then in January, I started the Kellogg plan as DOA because I couldn't believe they were still talking about it. All of a sudden, Kellogg was going to be in office. I was like, wait, do these people not realize that all the natural gas now goes through Turkey? Do they not realize that? I'm like, oh, no, they don't. Oh, I'm like, okay, well, then I started doing, I didn't want to post the articles in writing until the administration had changed, because then the susceptibility of the lawfare angle goes down a lot. So I started taking those papers when I got back from Panama, and I started putting them into formally, newspaper or more academic style, to actually go into publication on that website. But since then, now it's crazy because now a lot of the shows I watch, or one ever since the end of January. Well, it's not only the alternative media shows that I watch. You have the dumbass Mockingbird channels on YouTube that are totally miffed. You have mainstream media that's totally miffed. They haven't realized, none of them realize, that all Putin has to do is absolutely nothing and just watch the self-inflicted destruction of Europe. What Douglas Murray calls it, the strange death of Europe.
Yeah.
There's so many different, it's a suicide from so many different self-inflicted wounds. We could be here for another 5 hours.
But we got it. Well, talking about Europe again, Rolf again, he's a good friend of the show. He says if Britain's, and I'm going to kind of change the question a little bit to make it more relevant. He says if Britain's social security system ever, Allah forbid, starts to go bankrupt and the English flee from London and elsewhere, would that have consequences? Now I'll change that a little bit in the sense that as we've been talking about this recycling of money through what would probably be the largest money laundering center on the planet, which is the City of London. And I think most people on this show are aware of the difference between London and the City of London. But the fact that London is now being used in a way that it's not getting the same juice that it was before as a large vacuum cleaner for all the ill-gotten loot of the planet. And what do you think the consequences for the United Kingdom itself will be should the City of London be less of a center of global finance than it is today? What would be the effects on the greater United Kingdom should the financial center of the City of London be less important globally?
Oh, the collapse is imminent. That's why the banking community is freaking out, and because they're freaking out, that's why the politicians are freaking out, even though they're not really told the full story. Again, go back to my grand strategic levels. The banking community is sending its top economists and MBAs to the Yale Grand Strategies courses or the Oxford King's College geopolitical strategies courses, grand strategies courses. They're not sending everybody. They're only sending select few, and for different reasons. Some for brainwashing, some to build models. Fiona Hill and Applebaum and those people, they go to them for talking points. But when you're building theoretical predictive models like I do, then you're dealing with people that actually understand what's going on. If you anyway, I want to hit another question that someone said, Rubio's growing up a lot. Yeah, they got my models. Yeah, exactly. Now they're trying to figure out what to do. And yeah, you can see you'll see all the versions on Energy News Beat website. See, now is to the point where if all Putin has to do is nothing, well, then what can Trump do? Nothing. So if Trump can't do anything, the big risk to mission, and I put that in the bottom line up front on that paper that I gave you before, the 5 points, was that if Trump gets blamed for losing Ukraine, NATO, the EU, and the petrodollar, then he loses the midterms. The Democrats take over in the midterms, immediately impeach him after 2026, well, 2027 then. And then if they win the White House and both houses of Congress, well, then they reverse everything of Doge. They go straight for the Cloward pivot plan and the single party socialist state. So this lack of Trump's team to be able to do geopolitical modeling, the models that I've been doing on your show, Working Brother, Monster Consortium, and Energy Newsbeat is exactly what they lack. Trump is a real estate developer and a business and finance man. He is not a geopolitical theorist. He doesn't realize he hired a team that is very strong at the tactical and operation levels, and then very weak at the grand strategic level. That's the part that they missed. And yeah, and Jan knows I do that exclusively. So that, that's how that came about. But now they're trying to figure out how to man this. So just from the little tiny glimpse that I can gather from working around the edges, and as far as Trump's inner circle, I'm out in Pluto. Just so everybody knows. But from what I can kind of tell is, they're trying to figure out what to do because the original plan left. But then notice that Mike Waltz, Rubio, and Witkoff, Witkoff went to Moscow to start the talks that were stalled. Okay, and he got that Fogel guy back for the that teacher that got arrested for weed or something in Russia. Okay, so they give up that guy, big deal. But he went over there to rekindle the negotiations because it's in Putin's best interest to let the West collapse, and Putin wants Odessa Oblast. If he takes Odessa Oblast, again, he's going to stay in the Russian Orthodox speaking areas because he does not want to get into guerrilla warfare in the Catholic Ukrainian areas, because they're the ones that adhere to that 1930s ideology. So he's going to stay out of there, but he's going to want Odessa Oblast. And I've talked about this on the other shows. If the populists win from Germany all the way down the Danube River Valley, well, then if he moves up to the Odessa Oblast, he's moved right up to the Moldova-Romania borders. So then if the populists win the Danube River Valley, he's basically got full control of everything but the Baltic states, Poland, and Ukraine. And Ukraine at that point would be a rough state. So then he will have totally turned the tables on the Wolfowitz plan. I mean, the Wolfowitz plan has backfired every single conceivable way that you can think of. So now what's Trump going to do? What can he do? What he should be doing, Musk is right about this. Back the AFD. I think they got 19.5% of the vote today. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. We were going on, so I didn't have time. Well, I've been writing all day. I've been trying to get another four papers up on Energy Newsbeat, get the next tranche up. But I didn't analyze it, so I'm not sure what the AFD, what the ruling coalition is going to be. But it's not going to be the traffic light coalition of the SPD and the go down a little bit more.
Yeah, we've got the CDU at 208 seats at 28% of the vote. The AFD with 151 seats at 20%, 20.7. I'm just rounding, 21%. Yeah. So the CDU at 29%, the AFD at 21%, the SPD at 17%, and the Green at 12%. And
so it's not going to be.
And after that, just change.
It's not going to be the traffic light coalition, but it's going to be the CDU instead of the SPD. So the CDU is going to have a coalition, but still, it's whoever they do a coalition with is going to drag them to the left, because they're not going to. They said they're not going to go into coalition with the AFD. So I just don't. I don't see it having an effect of saving Germany. I think they continue to collapse. If they continue to collapse, well, then again, that doesn't bother Putin and Xi at all. But then Trump can't get sucked into it, because if Trump And Steve Bannon's been arguing, arguing this. I think he was the first person to argue it. If Trump starts to look like he owns Ukraine war, and what I mean by that is the Kellogg plan was to fund the Ukraine war, make a push, try to push Russia back, and then force Putin to negotiate, and then move in a ceasefire and peacekeepers. Lavrov and people have been saying they're not interested in that ever since last summer.
Mm.
So that would have worked. But had he done that, then that would have been like Nixon's Rolling Thunder and linebacker programs to pound the Vietnamese in Vietnam to the point that instead of ending the war, he owned it. And it led to his demise. Along with a whole bunch of other things. But anyway, so Steve Bannon was warning Trump not to fall into that trap. Okay, why is that important? Well, with the economies collapsing, the EU at the end of January, when I was still in Panama, they were already talking about, with that one last Nord Stream pipeline that's left, three of them are blown up, one works, of buying Russian natural gas through that. The CDU-CSU said the same thing because they didn't want the AFD to increase in the polls. Well, okay, what's wrong with that? Well, why would Russia want to save the EU, NATO, and the CDU-CSU? I mean, and then why would Trump want to come in and save them either? So the best option for Trump is just like Putin, do nothing. Then that leads to the next problem is we're back to the problem that we were talking about in March of 2022 is, Gonzalo called it the hatchling problem, where these people think that history started in February of 2022. They don't know any of the nature and causes that led up to the Russian invasion, when it's really simple. The West, proxy wars are started by fueling religious, ethnic, and linguistic tensions inside a given area. In this case, Ukraine. Doesn't matter where it is. When you're talking about irregular warfare, counterinsurgency, insurgency warfare, that's how you do it. I don't want to get too much into that, but yeah, that's what you're trying to inflame with identity politics. So in this case, they used the Catholic Ukrainians of the 1930s ideology. They trained them and equipped them in the Lvov area. That was a big thing written in Army Times and Stars and Stripes, from 2008 on, I think, or maybe even before. I don't know. So they've been talking about this next to forever. Well, then they trained them and equipped them in Lvov. But then after the 2014 Maidan coup, and everybody should watch Ukraine on Fire by Oliver Stone. I think he did 2 of those, if I'm not mistaken. But they moved those troops straight to Mariupol and Mariupol. Okay, well, what's the problem with that? Everybody needs to look at a map. The point of moving that heavy military equipment is to take over Crimea, where Russia's Black Sea Fleet is, and Russia's only warm water port at Rostov-on-Don. They're trying to control the Azov Sea, go back to the maritime, riverine, and terrestrial choke points. They want to put rockets and artillery in the shipping lanes of Russia's only warm water port. We've been talking about this for 3 years now. The people on this that watch this show and me on Working Brother and Energy Newsbeat, know it very well. But think about this: the TV generals, including Lieutenant General, Keith Kellogg and Ben Hodges, they don't know it. How did they get that many stars on their uniform without realizing this? That's a problem. That's a much bigger problem. And now Trump has now got to overcome decades and decades of propaganda that we need to do that we need to do another show on that because we're out of time now.
Well, we've got a couple of things. I got a couple of questions. The one we were talking about how Trump needs to do nothing, Putin needs to do nothing, and why would either of them come to the rescue of Europe and these institutions? There is Putin's even commented on the fact that he has no problem with Ukraine joining the European Union, and the European Union and its leaders Ursula von der Leyen and people like Macron and Olaf Scholz. They're all, we want Ukraine to be. They're fighting for Ukrainian. The Ukrainians are fighting for European values and the European dream, and we want them to live the European dream with us in the EU. And I would kind of, if I was thinking about this from Putin's point of view, I'd be take them, because as we were talking about previously in this live stream, that the European economy is sinking. They're in a mess, and adding this country, well known prior to the outbreak of the Ukrainian conflict, very, very corrupt, and now absolutely on life support from outside aid packages. And the country is an absolute mess. I mean, the reconstruction alone, I wouldn't even dare to guess the costs of that. But also the fact that most of the population, well, not most, but a very large chunk of what would have been the productive population, those being between 18 and 57, 58, 60 years old, the females have all left. Not all, but a very significant portion of them have left. And a significant portion of the men have been killed in this useless conflict. What do you think Putin has when he says he has no problem? What would be, in your estimation, the consequences of the European Union allowing the Ukraine to join their club?
There was no, okay. I'm
not talking about NATO at all. I'm just talking about the EU.
Yeah, I realize that. Mm-hmm. Yes, somebody put in the chat. I kind of lost it, but yeah, the Lvov area was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Empire. Yeah, he's correct. Yeah, the hatchling channels. Excuse me. Now I just call them the dumbass channels. No, they don't know what the ethnic makeup is of Ukraine. And just when I was in Afghanistan, 3/4 of the people there really didn't know very much about the ethnic conflicts in Afghanistan or in the surrounding region. You know, that's why I started developing my models of, from coin work, you know, of ethnic, religious, and linguistic differences, because that's where the rivalries are. And so, yes, if you want, I don't want to get too much into this because I want to say in 2016-ish, 2017-ish, you did a video on BlackRock and Vanguard owning the shares of the legacy media.
Yeah.
All right. If we can do another show, I have another paper on that because I want to build from your previous videos, which is how we started talking in the first place, and show how that works, because they've just engineered this war and made it look like Putin's fault, when clearly they're trying to take over his only warm water port and Crimea with the Black Sea Fleet in it. So they did a military action that provoked a military response. It should be obvious. Mm-hmm. Okay. But now BlackRock has been buying up that land in Ukraine. This is pre-planned. So going back to the grand strategic level, they're using all branches of the military at all levels, all branches of the executive branch agencies, and all branches of the IC, of the intelligence community, to do this over a 2 decades long period. You know, people need to consider that. What Wesley Clark was talking about with the foreign policy coup, yeah, it's basically building from your video, BlackRock and Vanguard. So they're the ones that are really pushing this. And then they've controlled the narrative because, they're controlling legacy media. And then, okay, we always knew that USAID and NED had been funding all these Operation Mockingbird channels on YouTube, because you have, okay, right now we're working on no budget and people can tell it's low production value.
Yeah.
So they have all these different channels that act like it's a one-person show, but really you have the NGOs writing the scripts. You have, and then supporting, some blogger who's doing okay by his own, but with $20,000 or $30,000 worth of support, now their shows look fantastic.
Yeah, they look like very polished productions. Yeah.
So what's going on there with these NGOs? They have, they bring in video techs and these NGOs, and they have a computer labs, so they can bring in the college students and other people that are in these different organizations. I think Mike Benz was talking about the AIDS HIV center in some place, but they make up some crazy left wing. They make up a name of an organization that's going to attract left wingers. Then they'll have computer labs in them with video techs in it to teach people how to do videos. But then the think tanks will also have the scripts. So, how much do the video labs, how much do the computer labs cost? How much does it take, does it cost to get a professional video editor that's been through the different schools to train other people to train other people?
Right.
These are, all said and done, is $20,000 or $30,000 a month in support. It may be only 10 grand in cash per month going to these people, but in support. And then they're boosted in the algorithms to get subscribers. So the algorithmic boost and the algorithmic shadow bans are very real. They're very real. I mean, you could see that with the whole rise of BreadTube, and especially a lot of the other YouTube channels that parrot talking points from the World Economic Forum for the most part, but then code it in a Marxist sort of lather and icing, as it were. If people go and look at the normie channels that just cover the war, I wouldn't name names, but it's people probably see them. There's all these people freaking out of, why is Putin surrendering Ukraine? Well, for one, and there's just hundreds of these channels. They just cover the war. They don't cover the geopolitical sea power versus land power strategies because they don't know anything about that. They're just tunnel visioned. It's like Plato's cave. They just, they have no idea what the light looks like. So they're just at a complete total loss of why, Trump is surrendering Ukraine. Well, the Wolfowitz plan failed. The Biden administration played all the cards, and Trump has to figure out how to tell people that he can't deal from a position of strength. He's instead, he's going to have to, instead of dealing with Putin from a position of strength, because Putin's got all the cards right now, he can only deal with Zelensky from a position of strength and the EU from a position of strength. That's why he's doing that, because there's so many shows that are miffed about why that's occurring. But going back to the other phase, it looks like they took the information that I've been doing on Energy Newsbeat, and Waltz and those guys, are in Riyadh at the adults table, and it looks like they didn't clue Kellogg in, because the entire month he was going around Europe pushing his plan. So it looks like they just used him as a decoy, from what I can tell way out here in Pluto.
Right.
So, just from my peripheral, conversations with people, that know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that's in the Trump inner circle,
Right. we're hitting about 1 hour 30 minutes. Do you have time to take perhaps a couple of call-in questions?
Yeah, I'll sit here for as long as you want. I don't care.
All
I
right.
just want to make sure that as soon as we can, if we could do a separate show.
We can
on
do it this
how-
week. We can do it this week. No problem.
And if you can get that Michael Sarah Cirillo thing going,
Yes. Yeah. We'll bring that on. Yeah.
because when I talk to Michael Sarah, I'm not going to be disrespectful.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
I did not that, and I don't want to be rude. I go and if I interview somebody and get a story, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna turn on a source, right?
Of course not.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Otherwise, nobody will tell me anything.
Exactly.
All right. But no, I did not mention that I had all these geopolitical models. I did not mention that, yes, Michael Sarah totally believes that Russia invaded for no reason. My impression, and I don't want to be rude, is there's so many people that are looking for a purpose in life, and there's no shortage of people of people like this on YouTube. They're everywhere. They're looking for something that they can hang their hat on that's true. So Russia invaded Ukraine for no reason.
For no reason, absolutely no reason whatsoever. It's an act of aggression that was, Putin just woke up one day and an absolute madman. And he said, you know what? After my cornflakes, we're going to invade Ukraine. We've got no reason to do so. And that's what we're going to do. And that has been the talking point of almost the entirety of the legacy mainstream media for the past 3 years, almost across the board, that we have a Putler is a madman and he invaded Ukraine with no legitimate reason, absolutely unprovoked. And the word they always use, and there must be some sort of psychological term for it, but the word they always use is unprovoked aggression.
Yeah.
Right.
When it's nothing but provoked.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I call them, land power versus sea power strategies.
Oh, but hold that thought. I just want to say to everybody in the chat, I am going to be putting a link into the chat right now, and I'll post it on YouTube and Rumble. For those watching on X, I'll hopefully put it onto the description on the X post on that you're watching it there. It is a link that you're going to need a browser to interact with us on the show, and it's you can put your name in there. If you want to use a camera, you can. If you don't, you just don't activate your camera. If you do want to actually ask George a question, or me, probably George, please, the only thing I'd say is keep it succinct and fast, because I'd like to keep people, if there are several people that would like to ask questions, I'd like to keep it in in a format that keeps the show rolling and not get stuck. So what I'm going to do right now is post this in the chat, so you can link it in the chat. I will pin it, and we'll keep that open for about 10 minutes, and then after that we'll continue the show and then wrap it up. So
yeah,
link,
go ahead. Hit the mute button in case somebody uses foul
well, that's
language.
exactly what I'm going to do. If anybody tries to come in and use foul language or just be a troll, you'll immediately be thrown out. So just forewarned, you're not going to be able to do that, because I'll have my finger on the mute button and the kick button. So just so you know it. So the link to join, if you have a question or you have a comment, you can join in this chat with George and I. But remember, questions or comments, please keep them brief. And if you're a troll, you'll be ejected immediately. And no foul language as well, please. So the link has now been released into all of the
so let me
different ones, and I'm gonna pin that. So you go ahead, George.
Yeah, I just for the people that are not familiar with the different sea power versus land power strategies. Yeah, my stuff is 700, 700 level plus, because I'm using integrated models, for the work that I need, because I'm trying to. It's a game among theoreticians to get everything down to 2-force physics models. So I'm just playing a game with other theoreticians So I do that. So mine are ultra, complex. Well, that it has to go into compound models to eventually turn it into compound mathematics. So, but for people that just need 100 or 200 level videos, Mr. Sin has really good 20-minute videos on Spikeman and McKinder. I ran across those things like years ago. And then what I tell everybody to watch the strategy stuff videos on Mahan, because his third chapter in that, he goes into the production, into wealth function, but he leaves out, he goes into sailing ships, shipping, railroads, highways, but he leaves out turning production into wealth by pipelines and electrical grid. So people just remember that and watch it. Then that's a great. All of his videos are really good in my opinion. He does like 300 and 400 level videos, and then real life lore. Okay, real life lore is kind of annoying because after every other sentence he says, "And Russia invaded for no reason." Okay, tune that out. And he does a really good video on the catastrophic energy problem of Russia, the catastrophic energy problem of Germany, and the catastrophic energy problem of China.
Okay. So with that, we already have a few people that would want to join, and I just say again, remember, guys, I'm going to bring you in first. We're going to bring in Alessandro. And again, you can join with a camera or without. It's up to you how you want to join. But remember, keep it brief. Please, no trolling. Okay, Alessandro, you're first. We've got a lot of people that want to join. So here we go. Alessandro. Alessandro, no mic. Okay, maybe I'll bring you back in after, Alessandro. If you can find a mic, that would work. All right. Arthur Jones, we're bringing you in here too. Here we go. Arthur, can you hear us?
Hey, how's it going?
It goes well. Do you have a question or a comment for our friend George?
Yeah, is there a possibility that BlackRock has bioweapons labs in Ukraine that they've invested in, and then that might also be a reason all this is also kind of heading towards that too? Or I don't know. I've heard people talk about that, but that was just my question.
Oh yeah, that was actually confirmed when Rubio was asking Victoria Nuland that in a congressional hearing. She admitted that.
Okay.
Yeah, so she brought it up, and the reason I think is because when the Russians were going to take over Mariupol, they were going to find them anyway.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, she clearly wanted to get out in front of the story. And while we're on Victoria Nuland, yeah, they didn't fire her from the State Department. They moved her over to the National Endowment for Democracy so she could continue during the Trump administration. Same thing with Savannah Power over at USAID. And so, yeah, that's why they went right in there and immediately cut off funding of those operations, because they set it up where these they would be funded in advance so they could keep on going and undermining the Trump administration. So that's why they went straight in and stopped the funding on USAID and NED. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to get cut too, but that's good enough.
All right. Thanks very much, Arthur. Do you have any other questions or comments?
No, just hey, thanks for the hard work, guys. Thanks, Black Pigeon, and keep up the good work, guys. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. All right, we're going to bring in. We've got a lot of different people here, so let's bring in Bill. So you remember, guys, you don't have to have a camera. You can have it if you like. You don't have to have a camera, but you do need a mic in order to talk with us. So bringing in Bill next. Hi, Bill. Okay, Bill, we're having trouble hearing you right now. I think your microphone might not be working. George, can you hear him?
No. I'm doing this because you probably can't hear us either.
Okay. Bill, we can't hear you. So I'm gonna pull you out and bring in on the next guest. You don't have to get off. We'll just bring you in a minute, okay?
Yeah.
You just got to get your microphone working, Bill.
Yeah. Restart your computer and get your mic to work or something.
Yeah. All right. So we'll bring in Harvest.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well, but we can hear a massive. You might want to turn off your computer screen because we can hear a big guy.
Okay, sorry about that. So I have one question. It's regarding how the Trump administration is saying, well, maybe we're going to take Greenland and maybe we're going to make Canada the 51st state. Maybe we're going to take back Panama Canal and so on, and we're going to take Gaza. But at the same time, they say they released this new budget for the military. They're going to say year after year, we're going to reduce the budget by 8%. So it's like what they're saying they're going to do and what they're actually going to do. It's contradictory, I can't quite understand it.
No,
it's all right. Thanks for your comment, Harvest. I'm going to pull you out just because it's just technical reasons. Thanks very much.
Yeah, he should shut off the sound.
Yeah.
No, it's not contradictory. We've had our twin deficits for decades now. The current account trade imbalances and the yearly and the year by year deficits that account for the accumulated national debt. So the Trump administration is immediately tackling those two twin deficits, the current account trade deficit with the reciprocal tax policy, which is really quick, really simple, will not take years of endless meetings and negotiations and like several rounds of the general agreements on tariff and trade that take forever and go nowhere. It's a real quick and simple reciprocal trade policy to try to rebalance, try to cut the current account balances down. And then Doge is taking care of the national debt. All right. If the Biden administration has played all the cards in Europe and the Trump administration does not want to pursue the Wolfowitz strategy anymore, then he needs to focus on a Western Hemisphere strategy. So that's what he's doing. And yes, I mean, I speak one way, but Trump loves to say stuff and just throws. People get
love him or hate him. It is interesting when he does that, is it not?
Yeah, I would never. What he says and does would never cross my mind in a million years.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got a bunch of people here, so let's bring in next Sal. Okay. Sal, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, my friend.
Okay, great. So the question is, I just heard of a theory from Tom Luongo, George, basically where the U.S. is being controlled by, I think he said, the city of London, where it's really not the Americans that are leading the charge, but it's always been the city of London. Are you familiar with his theory and his thoughts on basically along the same lines of what you're talking about?
I did not listen to Tom Luongo the other day when he was on, but I did listen to him last week. But he brings it up. Plus, Felix did a video on that like 4 or 5 years ago or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, the other question, really the question is, what is the desperation from the elites in Britain, Germany, and France, apparently, to go to war with China? I mean, with Russia. It just doesn't make sense to me because everyone here has been talking about suicide. I mean, it's suicidal.
That goes way back to British naval power history. I mean, like the day that that Peter the Great built St. Petersburg, they wanted to block in St. Petersburg port in the Baltic. And, going back when Catherine the Great took over Crimea from the Turks back in 1783 and put the Russian Black Sea Fleet there. Oh, the Russians were, I mean, the Brits have always been trying to block the Russians in. And Mackinder based his theory that he really never wanted the resources of the Russian heartland. Somebody was talking about Mackinder theory in the chat there. He didn't want the immense resources of the Russian heartland to ever get to the German industrial power center.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, so
but I think Sal's question though is why are not from the heartland versus sea power concept. Yeah. Why are the EU leaders? Why do they have such a hard on for going to war with Russia if it's so detrimental to their own country's well-being?
Oh, they're propagandized, which is why we need to do a whole separate show on that. Because if you just say it in a short form way, then people are just going to say, well, you're just conspiracy theorists. If you actually go through a step-by-step format, which I got it down to 8 steps, on a paper I'm going to produce, I don't know, later on in the week, I'll finish it. I got it in the rough draft. It's something I pulled off of LinkedIn because somebody wanted me to do an assessment on somebody else's LinkedIn page. But yeah, we need to do a whole separate show on that because, see, it's not just the media and the politicians that are propagandized. It's the military generals. It's everything. I mean, just listen to, if you listen to Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis and McGregor, they just, now McGregor's got a PhD, but they're wondering how, McGregor's wondering on why his other West Point graduate buddies are all into this propaganda, which cannot be true. Russia's fighting a defensive war. They got a 7-to-1 KIA-WIA ratio against Ukraine. It's not vice versa. And yeah, it's nuts, but they're so propagandized. You got the official narrative. I do my sea power versus land power theories because then you could do a quick Q bono assessment of who's behind what for what reason. Then you can easily see that this is obvious. You have you have overt operations that are done by uniformed military or diplomats, but when something blows up someplace, it's the covert reactions of which proxy group did they use, what's their, again, religious, ethnic, linguistic affiliation, and who has had past relationships with them. And it always goes back to, then you start to see the British, MI6, and then OSS versus Russian, it'd be the KGB, and now it's FSB, SVR. You start to see where these conflicts are and who's backing who, because you get the guy with the $7 sandals with the $7,000 rocket launcher that blows through 10 grand worth of ammunition a week. How does that happen? Well, those are covert activities, but you can tell very, very quickly who's doing what with my models.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Any other questions? Sal, I guess what we'll do is we'll probably be going over this in a larger format.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love the Duran. I watch them pretty much every day, but no, they don't know this whole sudden switch of the of the Trump administration. Yeah, that's that came from my work on Energy Newsbeat through Michael Yan.
Okay. Okay. Most of my friends and everyone, we just don't comprehend the suicidal tendencies of that elite. Even when they were just told by Vice President Vance, you either fix your act or you're going to be left alone. We'll leave your ass behind because we got Fortress America to build.
Right. So that's why they're doing that. But they don't have sea power versus land power models. Yeah, I mean, at least nowhere near mine. No, they went through a university system. We started to go over that in my Unified Behavioral Theory papers way back at the end of 2021. And people are like, why is that important? Well, now you have leaders that are just out in fantasy land with the DEI education, the woke education.
Well, I think, George, you explained this in one of our very first shows. First of all, I would suggest that anyone who becomes part of the system and part of the establishment, even to become part of the establishment, you're already going to have to be indoctrinated and trained into agreeing with that establishment in order to join it. George might be able to tell you very succinctly, because we've got a lot of people waiting, George, about, for example, your time in Afghanistan during the withdrawal and how the people at the embassy were reacting to the imminent fall of Kabul. And these are people that are supposedly working for the State Department, intelligent. They are supposedly educated and experts in the region that they're, well, maybe not experts in the region, but they are supposedly the ones that are in the country and there to understand it. And maybe you could just give a very, very brief story on the withdrawal and your time when in Afghanistan during the fall of Kabul.
Oh yeah, the government employees, I'll leave it that way. No, a lot of them really thought that once the American military left and we left, then they could deal with the Taliban.
Did you say something along the lines, George? Yeah. And then we'll move on. That they'd no longer be fearful or scared once the military had left.
Yeah, that was actually said by a number of people. And then some guy from the 82nd Airborne, because they came in for the evacuation. Some guy said that story on Washington Post or New York Times or something like that, and it got reported. So read that, because I don't want to be rude and talk too much about it. But it's I still got to worry about reprisals. Well, I don't want to be unprofessional either. But yeah, they should have been just a total lack of self-awareness of who these groups are.
And what's going on. All right, Sal, thanks very much for calling in. We're going to have to move on because we still got a few more people that want to get in. Thank you very much, Sal. And perhaps when George and I do an entirely dedicated channel, video, I'm kind of tired, video on this, you can call in and ask your questions then. So thanks very much, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, bye. We're going to try to bring in, let's see, Alessandro. Perhaps you've gotten your mic working yet? Alessandro, you're on with us, with George. Do you have any questions? Is your microphone working this time? It is not. So we're going to pull Alessandro out. No, he's saying sorry. That's okay, Alessandro. I'm just going to remove you from that. It's not anything personal. We've got two more people. Plastic Sim, you are with us now. Plastic Sim. And Plastic Sim seems to be having issues with his microphone too. Okay, guys, the only thing I'm going to pull Plastic Sim out, Jeff.
Hi, guys. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Jeff. Thanks very much for having the microphone ready and working. It is appreciated.
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's just such fun. You guys are this is just great stuff. It's just so neat. First time I've ever done anything like this. So I've got a bunch of things I want to say. First off, I just want to say what you guys were just talking about a few minutes ago about how the world leaders have all been indoctrinated into this groupthink, this neoliberalism, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's the world's biggest problem right now is how do we get those folks out of power and get them replaced with folks that haven't been just utterly brainwashed by this, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm talking about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm floating right now. Doge is ongoing. So, yeah, I'm trying to float a proposal because my work needs to go into the game theory community. You can't change, you can't change the university system overnight. The problem is they've abandoned the university project. People need to read. Well, first people should watch those. What's that guy's name? The Yuri Bezmenov videos. When by the time he did those videos on the demoralization of America by the KGB, it was already achieved during the 1980s, because in 1988, Alan Bloom wrote his book, Closing the American Mind, where he's talking about the far left moved into the social sciences that had not yet adopted objective measures and standards, is the words that he used. In 1992, in Barkow, Tubius, and Cosmides, The Adapted Mind. So people should get that book. You can get it for like $10 off of Amazon. It's a must-read in the interdisciplinary economic sciences and game theory, and especially evolutionary game theory. But there's an article in that called The Psychological Foundations of Culture. You can download that online for free. It's a PDF from University of Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB. I'm used to talking in acronyms. When I have to actually explain the acronym, I got to think about it. But yeah, from UCSB, you can download it from there. It's a long article, but it will explain, and they're writing from the field of evolutionary theory about, the physical sciences is a nice set of seamless theories, and the biological sciences the same way. But when you get into evolutionary biology, where it goes into social psychology and sociology, all of a sudden the social sciences are this complete jumbled mess. So yeah, my unified behavioral theory picks it up from that point and straightens out the whole thing in a two-force physics models, which took me a long time. So,
Jeff, do you have anything else to question or comment?
I think you guys are great, and I just wish I have you two. Have you? Sorry, sir, I don't know your name. Have you written to? We need folks like you in management positions.
I got canceled out of academia a long time ago.
That's not academia. You.
That's why I ended up.
You need to work in the Trump administration.
That's why I ended up in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then, whatever I was working on, just multiply it by 100, because I worked so many different places and did so many different projects. I learned stuff that I never, would have dreamed of without that experience. So actually, the left canceling me out of academia actually kind of made it worse. But yeah, we'll see, because right now Doge is cutting, and right now all the projects are on hold. So we'll see what happens.
You should be in charge. You should be hired by the team, by the Doge team that's cutting people.
Well, I tried to reach out with the other kabillion people on X and tell Musk that, but he didn't reply yet.
All right. Thanks very much, Jeff. It's appreciated.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Have a good evening. Bye for now.
We'll see if the Michael Yon network works.
All right. Ian, are you there?
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Good. Just before you go, George, can you take the question? I have to go relieve myself in the head. It's been about 2 hours, and I've been drinking a lot of tea. So I'll be back in 2 secs. Ian, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Hi, George. I was wondering what you thought of Putin's recent decree to create a new visa, the shared values visa, which is a shortcut for conservative Westerners who want to move to Russia. Do you think of it as a soft power move, or sort of an internal propaganda move to sort of align the country with a certain ideology?
Well, actually, I think if Roland is still in the chat, he's actually done that, I believe.
I'm actually planning to do it, getting ready currently, but I've found that Russians tend to have a much more traditional view on social issues in general, from the ones that I've talked to, and it seems like Putin's decree is kind of in line with that. And that's been my experience with the foreigners that have moved over there too.
Yeah, you can go into the Working Brother, General Conglomerate Media on Telegram, and yeah, Roland in that chat group has done that.
Cool.
The West is in serious decline, and Well, okay. I'll just put it. Let me just finish the thought here, because
Mhm.
the Wolfowitz plan is just backfiring in every single possible way that you can think of, and a lot that you can't. But one of them, I'm sure I'm just going to discover new stuff every single day as this stuff unfolds. But one of them is the West has always been having the brain drain going towards the United States, especially by using the H-1B visas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, by trying to collapse Russia, and Russia did not collapse. That's what this whole move in the EU and NATO eastward was supposed to do. Well, now the European economies are going to collapse. The Japanese were forbidden to complete the Hokkaido to Sakhalin pipeline. Their economy, their automobile industry is also collapsing. So now Russia can just buy these operating companies and just move them to Russia. So it's not just the people. It's whole operating companies. He can almost, in a year or two, he might be able just to buy them in bulk sale and move the, not just move the equipment and the machine tools to Russia, but then move the people too. Okay, if he can't move the machine tools because the EU globalists won't let him, well, then he's just going to move the people. So if you want to know what Putin's plan is motivated, yeah, it's to move the brain drain from going to the United States and Silicon Valley and Wall Street to have it move to Moscow instead. That's what's behind that.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I also wanted to comment that I see the war as really becoming increasingly a clash of civilizations. And to me, Russia, even though, I feel bad for the Ukrainian people, and I think it's terrible that we've wasted all this human life and money by perpetuating the war, but I see Russia as sort of like an alternative Europe. It's like European civilization that's taken a totally different path. And I'd prefer to be going down that path with them than the path that the West is currently going down.
Yeah, if you go to my 7P Plan of the Left series of papers, yeah, I'll post those up on Energy Newsbeat in their entirety. I have some, but I there's a whole bunch more of them.
Do you post under your own name or G3, or what is so people can find these on Energy Beat, George?
Oh yeah, George McMillan.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll post those up because, yeah, the 7P Plan of the Left is to take over the institutions and make it a socialist system. And part of the destruction of the university system and the social sciences, before I was talking about Tubia and Cosmitas, they've integrated biological and evolutionary studies. A guy named Vernon Smith had actually given me that book years back. That was a couple years after he shared a Nobel Prize with Daniel Kahneman. So he actually helped me with both ends of my model when I was only asking him about a certain aspect of it. He actually helped me on two ends of it with that one. Saved me a lot of time. But with that one, since they're in the evolutionary biology area, they have no idea what the social sciences should actually be like. They just know it's a mangled mess. What it needs to go to is it needs a series of hard modeling stuff. So Russia's is going to collapse, but yes, they actually want to just take everybody that they can in the East. Yeah, you got another question, or did I answer that question? I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. Sometimes something happens in the room and my attention diverts.
Well, you did answer it in a way. I gather from your answer that it's a lot more of an economic move. I was kind of wondering whether it was aimed more at shoring up sort of popular support for Putin's sort of ideological mission, or if it was actually sort of a soft power propaganda move toward conservative Westerners.
Yeah, okay, I remember what I was going to say. after the collapse of communism, because communism was going to be the atheist, utopia. Well, Putin and, after reading Solzhenitsyn and all that, realized that no, Marxism and atheism does not hold the culture together, because religion is an evolutionary stable strategy focused on the family, the very thing that the Rousseau, Marx, Engels theory was trying to get rid of. So he knows he needs to go back to religion and evolutionary stable strategies to keep his demographics. Women need to pump out some kids and with a father in the household to have a functional family unit. So
and the functional family unit is the building block of civilization.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So he's been rebuilding the Orthodox Church once he got in power. The leftist atheists in the United States loved the communist Soviet Union because it was atheist. They hate Putin because he's rebuilding the churches in Western Russia. Also, the Saudis are spending a lot of money in rebuilding the mosques in Central Asia, but the Central Asian stands are trying to keep out the Wahhabis. So that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But just to give you, so he does realize that you do need religion, but it can't be Islamic fundamentalism.
Perfect. There's a great answer, and it also explains why the Western liberal world order hates Russia so much right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're just, again, read the 7P plan. I'll make sure I post them, all of them, because I got a long version of it that's mass migration in the 7P plan, but I did another version where I broke it up into a whole bunch of shorter 2- and 3-page papers that are a little bit more easily digestible, because I'm going over the history of leftist literature, because every time there's a failed Marxist experiment, they rebrand it, but what they keep is you have to get rid of property rights, marital rights, and religion to break down the nuclear family, so then people will adhere to the state. So in psychological theory, you have Pavlov's dogs that have classical conditioning, and then Konrad Lorenz is operant conditioning. J.B. Watson's behaviorism is based on operant conditioning. They think that you can operantly condition humans. That's what this experiment ultimately is, in depth psychology. But that's based on Marx thinking that there's life force energies and a cognitive element. Well, let me get into this just a second.
Sure.
Freud's libidinous theory, his id, ego, and super ego model is incorrect. I use a life force energy, instinctual drive, and cognitive model, because if the three aren't linked, they're not integrated, then you have psychological disorders. So that my models explain how psychological disorders then relate into a functional political, economic, and geopolitical unit. So I go from individual to small group to large group social dynamics in one singular model, which takes a lot of pages of paper. But yeah, ultimately it boils down to a cyclical model, which is not true. There is a life force and a soul.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to another question, and this might be too big to answer, but it makes me wonder how much Trump and J.D. Vance know, and if the pivot has to do with maybe Trump realizing some of the same things on the civilizational level that, Putin is trying to turn things around in his country, and maybe on some level Trump sees some of the damage that's already been wrought in the US and Western Europe. And if he wants to start leading the US down a different path now, like Putin is.
Well, yeah, he is. Right now, I mean, okay, I'm doing theoretical models, so I have to go from abstract metaphysics to, to concrete stuff at one end on the other end of the model. But yeah, no, he's focused on immediate problems of tackling the twin deficits in the United States to keep us financially stable, and then we'll see how far that goes. Felix has done videos on. You did them on John Glubb, because he's got the shortest, most succinct cyclical models of the rise and fall of cultures. Usually, once they're at this path, it reaches a cataclysmic end before there's a rebirth.
Well, when I heard J.D. Vance's speech, it made me think that they really do see our support of Europe as actually harmful to Europe, and that they really need Europe to go ahead and hit rock bottom for its own sake. And maybe Trump doesn't have any real apprehension about just dropping Europe and starting a geopolitical and economic alliance with Russia, which obviously couldn't happen overnight because of all the issues and the lack of trust there. But I don't know, it seems plausible to me that he could really want to do that.
Yeah, he's been, Trump's been talking about there's no need for NATO for decades. A lot of people have, but he's one of them, so he's consistent with that. Well, that's why in my papers I've been arguing that he needs to just go ahead, support the populist parties, and they're doing that because they cut the USAID funding and the NE funding that rigs the elections over there. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to cut that for the so you don't get a strike.
Calm yourself there, George.
Yeah. So, I had to get rid of my old YouTube channel because it was nothing but strikes. That's another story. But yeah, he needs to just go ahead and just let the populist parties take over, and just let the populists get rid of the EU and NATO by themselves, because again, it's globalist institutions that do exactly what the structuralists and dependency schools have been saying for the past 80 years, that all it does is just move the money to London and Wall Street. And also, I might as well throw in the people from the city of London, the square mile is what I'm talking about. They actually set up similar banking institutions in Dubai and Singapore. So it's all meant to funnel the money into London and Wall Street. So the rich get richer, and then the poor get poorer.
Thanks, Ian. With that, do you have any closing questions? Because I have to. We're gonna have to wrap it up.
No, that was perfect. And wow, what an excellent and fascinating answer. You answered multiple questions, so I really appreciate it. What a great stream, guys.
All right, thanks so much for joining us, Ian. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
All right, bye for now. Bye. All right, we had a few other people waiting in the queue, but they kind of came, went. There was one person who kind of came and went. I think they might have had internet troubles, and there was a few of them that I could tell didn't have their microphones working. So I think we're going to probably end it with that, guys, insofar as the joining the show. We're going to have to probably end it there, too, because we're approaching 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think we've been going quite a while. Just a couple of things before we do, though, George. There's a question here in the super chats from Arthur Jones again, and he says, is it true that American special forces are fighting alongside Ukrainians? I think the answer to that is, I pretty much know the answer to that, but what are your thoughts on that, George?
I can't comment on that.
Right. Okay. No commenting on that. And I'll just say it'd be difficult for...
Well, you've met in Thailand. I introduced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say. Oh, another thing I should probably tell people that George and I are not just internet friends. We've met in New York City and Manhattan. I think we had an all-nighter that time, didn't we? I don't even think you. I think I walked you back to your hotel at like 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
Yeah, it was like it was before sunup, but yeah, we
Yeah.
went over a lot of stuff.
Yeah. It was, and we've met in Thailand as well. And George has introduced me to a number of people that aren't Ukrainian but are in Ukraine. They take their leave in places like Thailand, and so let's just say that they're in Ukraine, but they're not Ukrainians. And I've met them. Some of them quite nice people. Some of them interesting. Let's just say interesting people.
Yeah, it's suicide by war. You know,
Yeah,
like,
there's definitely some of. I didn't want to say it, but there was definitely a few people there that were suicide by war type individuals. Another one. Again, from our friend Rolf Steiner, he says, "Is everyone getting a lot poorer with these wars?" I think the answer clearly to that question is yes. I don't think you're going to disagree with me on that, George. Another one is, and I would agree, is it easier to control an impoverished population? I would say it depends. I would say a demoralized population, absolutely. An impoverished population, it depends. It's something we could probably go over later. And another one from Ranulf White Wolf, and he says, "Great stream, guys. Please tell me where to find George's writings." Yes, exactly. So what I'm going to do is not only on my X account, you can find me on Navy at Navy Hatto. I will post a link to all of George's sources. I'll also, for those watching this on the rerun or not on the live stream, I'll post it directly into the description on Rumble. I don't think I will on BitChute. I don't think on DLive they have that. And again, I'll do it on X. So I'll post all of George's writings and links to find George in multiple places so you can find them. So hopefully that answers that. George, unfortunately, we could go on almost forever in this. Is there anything perhaps that you would like to say in sort of as we wrap it up?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, because everything else we really need to do a whole nother show on the mass media manipulation, because that'll take too long and people need to focus.
Absolutely. Okay, well, it's been a pleasure to have you here with us, George. I can't tell you how much I enjoy these conversations. I mean, we've been having them for a long time. Hopefully we'll be having one again this week. It's more or less dependent on when you, George, are ready and able to do it. With that said, thanks very much, everybody, for joining. I very much appreciate it. One last from Korungil. He says, "I'm sorry I came in late. What's the TLDR?" The TLDR is that Putin.
All Putin has to do is nothing, and the West collapses.
Yeah.
And Trump, all Trump can do now is nothing but join Putin in watching the West collapse.
Right.
But Trump rather needs to figure out how to tell people that what they've heard in the mass media and the Mockingbird alternative media has been complete nonsense for over 2 decades.
All right. Thanks, George. We have actually Deidre Hastings. She's been trying to join. I think she's had some problems with her internet. I'm going to bring her in right now. Deidre, can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much for having that.
Okay, great.
I'm working. Yeah.
I have a question. So I've been following the gold market, and there is a huge gold squeeze going on with the LBMA, which is the Bank of England, and they haven't been able to deliver the gold. I have a feeling that this is all interrelated. Do you think that this Trump pulling out of the Ukraine war could collapse the Bank of England?
Short answer is yes. I'm not going to be an expert on that.
Hear you. I can't hear you guys.
You can or you cannot. I think we've lost Deidre. I think Deidre was having some problems with her internet connection previously as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm known for that in Thailand, but
you became known as Where is George?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm not in. I'm not in Thailand anymore. So that situation improved, or in Cambodia or Laos or wherever
wherever it is you were. Yeah.
From a bunch of different places on this show. Yeah. Whenever you call, whatever I'm doing, I just do the video from wherever I am.
Right.
But yeah, it's the Bank of England really, 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 really thought that Russia was going to collapse into a whole bunch of different republics and oblasts. A really good video on that is on the YouTube channel Unheard. It's how does Russia going to break apart? If you get to that video and watch that, you'll see a whole bunch of other videos on it. But yeah, that was basically the neocon plan, was to break it up and then swoop in and take the well, it comes down to natural gas, because everything else you can ship easily. They really wanted the Caspian Sea oil and gas reserves in Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan.
Right.
And the land bridge choke points to get it there.
All right. So everybody, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining George and I in this. I would say I really enjoyed this one because we've also added guests from the audience. I thought it made it a lot more interesting. I don't know how you felt, George, but I thought it was pretty cool.
Oh, I could do this all day long.
Excellent.
Or all night long, actually. It's, you're in Tokyo and I'm in Texas, so
it kind of works, doesn't it? It does work. Yeah. All right, everybody. So thanks very much for being here, and we will see you again very soon with more. Bye for now.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, just to let you know, I have some old favorites as well as new t-shirt designs on sale right now. Link to find them is in the description, and would like to thank you in advance, as it really does help the channel, as for years now, content like this has been put into an algorithmic black hole, as well as being demonetized.